Hello everyone, a very good evening and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep. Welcome to our weekly current affairs webinar. So today we are going to take up some important topics for your prelims. Over the last 1 week, there were a number of important developments which were in news. So carefully we have chosen a few topics and today we are going to discuss them in complete detail. We'll cover these main topics. There will be 5 topics chosen. And under the discussion, we'll also try to cover a lot of subtopics from where you can expect prelims questions. So before we begin, those who are new to the platform, just ensure that you download the Byju's Exam Prep app. Use your phone number to log in. And once you log in, select the IAS icon. Once you log in, select the IAS icon and you'll be able to access all the study material that is needed for your preparation. So let's start with today's discussion. We'll start with the first topic and we're going to talk about the Ceravac vaccine, which was in news over the last 1 week. This particular topic made a lot of news because the Ceravac vaccine happens to be an indigenous vaccine. It is India's first vaccine that has been developed indigenously to prevent cervical cancer. It will be a weapon for India to protect its women primarily who are affected by cervical cancer. So we need to understand what is cervical cancer, what causes it, what is the incidence rate or the disease burden, especially in India, what are the consequences of this cancer, this particular disease, and how will this vaccine help in our fight against cervical cancer? What is so special about this indigenously developed vaccine? So these are some key points we need to cover, and we'll also take up a practice question at the end so that you get an idea as to what kind of questions UPSC could ask on such important current affairs topics. See, cervical cancer primarily affects women, and in most cases it is caused by a virus known as HPV, the human papilloma virus. So this is a key point for you to remember for your prelims. Cervical cancer is primarily caused by a type of virus known as the HPV, the human papilloma virus. Obviously, the cervical cancer, as the name itself suggests, it affects the cervix, right? So in a few minutes, we're going to discuss what exactly is cervical cancer, what are the consequences of it. But before that, let's understand the burden of this disease. Let's understand the spread of this disease around the world, in India as well, and what is the impact of this particular cancer on women. According to various studies, and even according to data brought out by WHO, the World Health Organization, cervical cancer happens to be the second most common type of cancer that is prevalent amongst women, especially amongst women who are of reproductive age. Those who are in the reproductive age group, they are highly prone and vulnerable to cervical cancer. It also happens to be the second most common cause of cancer-related death in the world. So this statement here, this fact which has been given, this alone will help you understand the gravity of the disease. The disease burden is very high in India and around the world. In India alone, at least around 20 to 25% of the cases are reported every year. Out of the total cases of cervical cancer that come up in the world, every year 20 to 25% of it is reported in just India alone. According to estimates from the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, around 1.2 lakh cases are reported in India every year. Out of these, around 77,000 deaths are reported. Now, this is a very high disease burden. See, the thing is, cervical cancer can not only be treated, but it can also be prevented. It's a cancer which can be prevented, or even if it occurs, it can be treated, provided if there is early detection, provided if there is better screening, provided if there is a vaccination program in place. Because the spread of HPV and its impact can be curtailed by a vaccine. There is a vaccine available to help build immunity against this virus, that is HPV, the human papilloma virus. Cervical cancer is preventable. This is another key fact you have to remember. There could be a question on these lines in UPSC prelims. So this is a disease which is preventable, and yet the disease burden in India and around the world is very high. In developing countries and as well as in developed countries, the disease burden is still very high, and it's highly unfortunate because the disease is preventable with a vaccine. Even if the disease occurs, even if the cancer is reported, it can still be treated if there is better screening and early detection. So that is why the development of this indigenous vaccine is so important. That is why this topic was widely covered in newspapers, and hence it's going to be very important for your prelims as well, right? In India, one woman every 8 minutes, in every 8 minutes, one woman is losing a life because of this preventable disease. So let's understand a little more about cervical cancer and as well as about this vaccine called the Ceravac vaccine. So first you need to understand, what is the cervix? Where is it located? How does this cancer occur? In this image, you can see the female anatomy over here, right? Cervix is located in the lower abdomen. As you can see in the image, it is located in the lower abdomen and it connects the uterus with the vaginal tract. This is where the cervix is located. Here you can see a normal healthy cell, how it looks. But those who are affected with HPV, the human papilloma virus, those who are infected with it, over a period of time, it might take months or years, those who have this slow breeding infection of HPV, they might start reporting a mutation in these cells. The cells of the cervix will start undergoing abnormal changes. Due to these abnormal mutations, the tissue here becomes cancerous, and this cancer can quickly spread to other parts of the body as well. It can cause cancer of other organs as well. This is a very slow spreading disease that actually is an advantage. Once these cells turn cancerous, the spread of the cancer is relatively slow compared to other types of cancers. Compared to lymphoma and other deadly cancers, cervical cancer is slow spreading in nature. So this actually buys you more time to detect the disease and to cure the disease, to curb the cancerous growth. So when this opportunity exists to cure the patients or even to prevent the disease altogether, right, you need a solid healthcare infrastructure system to be able to achieve this. Because these many deaths shouldn't be happening because the disease burden here is very high, especially women from poor backgrounds, right? In developing nations, the disease burden has a much wider impact. That's the reason why a vaccine against HPV is crucial for this fight. Is that clear? Those who are affected by cervical cancer, they do start reporting a few symptoms. For example, they might report swelling in the lower abdomen. Abnormal pain might be reported. There might be vaginal bleeding as well. So such signs do exist, and immediately when such signs are present, the concerned individual should get tested. The screening for cervical cancer is relatively cheaper. It is available. The diagnostics is there. The only thing is, on time, screening has to be carried out. Especially women who cross the age of 35. Those who are in the age group of 35 to 45, they are the most vulnerable. Remember, I told you earlier that cervical cancer affects women who are in the reproductive age group. Within that, those who are between 35 to 45 years, they are the most vulnerable. Is that clear? So how does this virus spread? What is the primary source through which this virus is spreading? This virus is a sexually transmitted infection. This is the most common route. The most common route of getting infected with HPV is through the sexually transmitted route. So those women who have multiple sexual partners, or those who started having sexual intercourse at a very young age, right, they tend to be slightly more vulnerable. But even otherwise, even women who have a single sexual partner, even they could be vulnerable, because this virus circulates in the community. It's already under community transmission around the world. So there are chances of women in the reproductive age group getting infected with the virus, and if it leads to a long lasting infection, a low lying long lasting infection, chances are very high that it could lead to abnormal mutations in the cervical cells. The cervical wall, which you see here between the uterus and the vaginal tract, right? The cells in the tissue there starts reporting abnormal mutations. So this will turn cancerous, and it might start spreading to other organs as well, right? So this is where the healthcare system needs to put in place the required measures to prevent and treat the disease. We need effective screening. The diagnostics are available. It is cheap as well, right? But women should be more aware about the disease. The moment they report symptoms, or even without that, in general, women who are of reproductive age, they should preferably get an annual checkup done. Especially those who are in the age group of 35 to 45 years, without fail, they should get an annual checkup done, right? So through better screening, you can detect the disease early, and since it is a slow spreading cancer, you can cure the patient as well. But an even better solution is to prevent this disease altogether, because vaccination is available to help build immunity against HPV. Is that clear? Please remember this point. There is a vaccine available for preventing HPV, right? So these are some key pointers that you need for answering any question, any science and tech question in your prelims. Now let's understand a little more about the vaccine itself. As I mentioned, vaccination is available. It has been introduced in India as well long back. But all these vaccines that are currently present, right, they're all developed by foreign pharmaceutical companies. There are major MNCs like Merck, GSK or GlaxoSmithKline, which have developed vaccine for HPV and cervical cancer. But the problem is they are very expensive. I've given the prices as well here, the market prices. For single dose, it might cost anywhere between 2,800 to 3,300 rupees, right? So the cost of the vaccine is slightly higher. It is not affordable for everyone. So this has always been a barrier with regard to increasing the reach of vaccination. Because of the higher cost, even the government had not introduced it into the National Immunization Program, the NIP. Through NIP, all the basic vaccines are covered. But vaccine against HPV has not been included, even though it has been made available since 2008. Vaccines have been available since 2008, but these are all foreign made vaccines, more expensive, and as a result, difficult to afford for the common people, right? Even the government found it difficult to expand the reach of the vaccine, mainly because of the cost involved. So this is where Cerovac vaccine makes a huge difference, because it is an indigenously developed vaccine that has been developed by the Serum Institute of India, the Pune-based Serum Institute of India, which also produced Covishield, which mass-produced Covishield at a record rate to help us tackle the pandemic, right? So the same biotech firm, the SSI, has indigenously developed this vaccine called Cerovac. See, the advantage of this vaccine is that it is able to target multiple strains of HPV. I'm sure most of you would know that viruses come in different strains, right? They regularly undergo mutations, just like COVID-19, just like SARS coronavirus 2. And every now and then they do undergo these mutations, and new strains keep coming up. So HPV is no different. Even this virus has undergone a lot of mutations, and there are many strains which have been identified that are listed over here. And these strains are considered as high risk for causing cervical cancer. Almost 90% of women who are infected with these strains, strain 16, 18, 31, 33, etc., right? They have a 90% chance of developing cervical cancer a few years down the line. Is that clear? Whereas type 6 to type 11, type 6 and 11, these strains are low risk types. Even they can cause cervical cancer, but the percentage is lower. So any vaccine, it should target both. It should be able to target the high risk strains along with the low risk strains as well. That is when a vaccine can be effective, right? It should be able to target multiple strains. It should be able to target a mix of high risk strains and low risk strains. When both are covered, it gives better protection, better immunity against the infection. Is that clear? So this is the advantage of India's indigenously developed vaccine. The Serovac vaccine is a quadrivalent vaccine. Please remember this point. It's a quadrivalent vaccine, meaning it can protect women against 4 strains, that is 6, 11, 16 and 18. It covers a mix of low risk strains and high risk strains, thereby providing coverage for at least 90% of HPV that is prevalent in the developing countries. These are the strains which are most prevalent in developing nations like India. So the primary focus for India has been strain 6, 11, 16 and 18. And that is exactly what this indigenous vaccine is targeting. So by covering a mix of low risk and high risk strains, it is giving almost 90% protection with regard to the viruses and the strains that are prevalent in developing nations. So that is a huge advantage of this indigenously developed vaccine. And even the technology which has been used to develop this vaccine is quite unique. It makes use of something called as VLP platform. It stands for virus-like particle. It makes use of a virus-like strain. The genetic structure has been taken from the actual live virus, and a virus-like particle is created to mimic the structure of the virus itself. So this will help in training our immune system to identify this virus when a woman is infected with this virus, right? A virus-like particle platform has been used so that the immune system gets used to it. The immune system develops a memory against this particular strain, the 4 strains that we discussed. So this gives a wider coverage. It is considered to be a very efficient and effective way of targeting the HPV virus. Is that clear? So it's a quadrivalent vaccine providing protection against 4 strains and developed on a state-of-the-art platform called VLP, that is virus-like platform technology. Studies and trials have shown that the response, the antibody response, was nearly 1,000 times higher than the baseline target. The antibody response was very good. That will help provide wider coverage to India's population, right? So that is why experts are believing that this is a great opportunity for India to not just tackle the disease, but to eradicate it. There is a possibility that with an effective vaccination drive in the coming years, we can eliminate cervical cancer in India and save around 77,000 lives. Because every year more than 1 lakh women are getting infected and they are reporting cervical cancers, and nearly 70,000 plus women are losing their lives. Like I said, this is a disease which is absolutely preventable, right? Even if the cancer develops, with better screening and better treatment, lives can be saved. So that is the reason why the vaccine is very crucial, and the government can even think about rolling out the vaccine as part of the national immunization program. Because the indigenous vaccine is very affordable. The cost has been reported to be around 200 to 400 rupees per dose, which is almost 10 times lesser than the foreign vaccines. So this will allow the government, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, to quickly expand the program and reach the target population, right? The most vulnerable will have to be covered, especially those who are above 60 years. Then those in the age group of 35 to 45 years, and all women in the reproductive age, that is roughly between 16 to 50 plus, right? So once the target group is covered, stage by stage, we will be able to eliminate this disease altogether. So that is why this topic was so important, and we had to study these key details. Here I've added an infographic as well, which gives you a summary about what we discussed. This vaccine, Ceravac, it will have to be administered in multiple doses to build up a better immune response. For younger girls, starting in the age group of 9 to 14, right, the vaccine can be started early, even before women reach the sexual reproductive age. Even before that, the vaccine administration can start, and then 2 doses would be sufficient. But later, post 15 years, right, in this age group, at least 3 doses would be needed for an effective immune response, right? So that is why this is a huge development in the field of science and technology and healthcare. So since it's an important development, you can definitely expect questions over here, and you have to be prepared for this topic. There could be a question on the vaccine itself, a very simple, straightforward question. There could be question on HPV and cervical cancer, right? The analysis that we discussed is also very important. The cost analysis, the disease burden, all those points are very crucial because there can be conceptual questions on this. You should prepare not just for fact-based questions, but as well as conceptual questions. So let me help you with one practice question here. And if you're able to crack this, right, and if you're able to revise this topic again after the session, I think you'll be in a very good position to answer any question on this topic. So let's take a look at the question. Consider the following statements. HPV causes cervical cancer only in women. India reports 90% of cervical cancers in the world. The world's first vaccine against HPV-induced cervical cancer has been recently developed in India. Which of these statements are correct? Go through the options. In the meantime, let me launch a poll so that you will be able to answer the question. It will make the session a little more interactive as well. I have launched the poll, 30 seconds. So please try and answer this question. Read the statements carefully. 3 statements have been given. Remember what we discussed. It's not a straightforward question. There is a conceptual understanding behind this. So if you understood what we discussed, I think you should be able to answer this very easily. 5 seconds to go. Let's see how many of you will get it right. Fantastic. Majority of them, 57%, have got it right. Option A is the correct answer. Only statement 1 is correct. HPV causes cervical cancer only in women. That's pretty obvious, right? It was a very simple, straightforward statement. But the second and third statements are incorrect. India doesn't report 90% of the cases in the world. That's way too high. We report around 20 to 25%. That's the average. So that's why second statement is wrong. Third statement is also wrong because this is not the world's first vaccine. See, this is where you have to be very attentive while reading questions. Now, the moment you see this question, you might get excited that I know everything, and you might get overconfident. If you don't read the statements carefully, chances are high that you might get an answer wrong, right? So never do that mistake. Read the question carefully. Yes, this is our first indigenous vaccine in India, but this is not the world's first vaccine against HPV. There are many other vaccines as we discussed, right? So if you're able to think for a second, I think you'll be able to get this answer right. So option A is the right answer. Now, since we completed the first topic, let's see if you have any questions. We'll try to answer the questions immediately after each topic. That would be a better way of covering current affairs. Let's not keep every question to the end. Let's try and answer it then and there. Banu is asking, sir, what is type 6, 11, 16? They are different strains of HPV virus, right? Just like you have different strains of SARS coronavirus 2, which causes different COVID-19 variants. Similarly, HPV virus also has undergone mutations, right? So based on that, these different names have been given: type 6, type 11, type 16. You need not mug it up. You need not remember it. Just know that there are different strains, and it's better if you know which strains are targeted by Ceravac vaccine. It's a quadrivalent vaccine. So remember only those 4 strains. That is more than enough. Next student is asking, can it be taken as a preventive vaccine? Absolutely yes. That's what I was saying. It is a preventive vaccine. It can prevent the infection altogether. Sugapriya is asking, which institution developed it? SII, Serum Institute of India, Pune, has developed this vaccine. Priyanka is asking, symptoms of cervical cancer. Symptoms can vary from person to person, but the usual symptoms are swelling in the lower abdomen, right? Especially in the vaginal area, pain, bleeding, discharge. So all these symptoms are usually reported along with slight fever. But please know that it's a very slow infection. It infects slowly. The symptoms are reported over a long period of time. That is why women often tend to neglect the symptoms. Is that clear? It's a slow growing infection, and even the cancer is slow spreading. So once there are signs, immediately the particular person has to get tested. Or in general, a better practice is that women of reproductive age, all women, they have to get an annual checkup done. That is what the government is also focusing on. See, right now awareness is very less in the country. So the government is trying to promote better awareness because we have a vaccine available, and through annual screening, annual checkup, there can be early detection and better treatment. And to prevent the disease altogether, the focus should be on increasing the coverage of the vaccination program. Rudrika is asking, what's the meaning of quadrivalent vaccine? Quadrivalent vaccine means that it is capable of targeting 4 strains of that virus. Is that clear? 4 strains of that virus can be targeted. Anup is asking, sir, please explain VLP again. VLP stands for virus-like platform. It is one of the technologies or one of the methods through which vaccines are developed, right? Vaccines are developed through various methods. For example, in certain vaccines like polio, a live virus is taken and deactivated, and you have a deactivated virus in the vaccine, right? The actual virus which causes the infection itself is there in the vaccine, because the idea is to train your immune system to detect that pathogen. In virus-like particle technology, VLP, the genetic strand, the DNA strands of the virus are taken, right? And from that, a virus-like particle is developed. A particle which looks or which behaves identical to an actual virus. So this is more effective in training your immune system. Trials and studies have shown that VLP technology, especially for HPV, VLP platform vaccines are better because it trains your immune system better, the immune memory will be better, and your immune response, the antibody response, will be much, much stronger. So that is why Ceravac has the potential to prevent almost 90% of cervical cancer cases. Deepika is asking, sir, is it already available to the common people? It will be rolled out in the market very soon. It has been just approved by the Drugs General Controller Authority of India. It has just received approval from the government, right? Very soon, within few weeks or maybe a couple of months, it should be available in the market. Is that clear? Okay. So guys, these were some questions. Now let's move to the next topic. The second topic, this is from cyber security. It's another important trending topic which was in news. It's called exercise synergy. So we need to understand what is exercise synergy, and we'll also cover a number of subtopics under it. So please pay attention for the next 15 minutes because we are going to discuss some key concepts over here. Exercise synergy was a cyber security exercise that was hosted by India. See, of late, cybersecurity has become a huge challenge, right? The cyber domain today defines the economy. The global economy is based on the internet. The internet has become the backbone of the global economy today. So along with that, a number of threats have come up. including cyber crimes, right? Cyber attacks designed to steal information, steal data, to hold people at ransom, to steal identity. And we've also seen that the cyberspace has become the fifth dimension of warfare, correct? So you not only witness crimes in the cyber domain, you also witness state-sponsored attacks where governments are fighting wars against each other. Countries have dedicated cyber armed forces. So traditionally, we had four dimensions of warfare, that is land, sea, air, and outer space. These were the traditional dimensions of warfare where wars were fought between countries. But with the emergence of internet communication networks, there is a fifth dimension of warfare, that is cyberspace, right? Even though it has so many advantages, so many benefits for the economy, for the common man, even though it has truly democratized the global economy and the global society, right? It does bring about a number of threats and risks. Like I said, cyber criminals could misuse the data of their targets. They could steal identity. They could steal money. There could be financial theft, right? There could be fraud committed through cyber attacks. And states could go to war against other countries. They could carry out cyber espionage to steal sensitive classified information as well. So cybersecurity has become a critical aspect of national security today, right? So in this regard, in India, we have a nodal agency, a dedicated institution to deal with cybersecurity called CERT-In. It stands for Computer Emergency Response Team, India. This is the dedicated nodal agency in India to protect and defend Indian cyberspace. It is this institution which organized this exercise last week. Exercise Synergy was organized by CERT-In in collaboration with the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore. Understood? So please note down this important fact. The exercise was organized by CERT-In, Computer Emergency Response Team, India. This exercise was mainly focused on tackling the threats posed by ransomware. The focus of Exercise Synergy was to build resilience against a type of malware called ransomware. So from this topic, you can expect three types of questions. One, there could be a very simple, straightforward question on Exercise Synergy, right? What did Exercise Synergy deal with? It dealt with cybersecurity, a very simple factual question. Or there could be a deeper question, a deeper conceptual question here, either on CERT-In or on ransomwares. You should understand what is a ransomware, what is the threat posed by it, right? So that is what we are going to discuss, and then you'll understand the significance of this exercise that was hosted by India. Is that clear? See, to tackle ransomwares, there is a global framework today. There is an international platform created called the International Counter Ransomware Initiative. This is a global platform created by various countries to build coordination, to build synergy between various countries to tackle the threats posed by a type of computer malware called ransomware. Don't worry, I'll explain what is a malware. I'll explain what is a ransomware. We'll come to that. For now, just understand that we have an international counter ransomware initiative under which there is a resilience working group for building resilience amongst countries to fight ransomwares. Ransomwares have become a huge menace in the cyber domain. Many individuals, many government organizations, many private companies have been deeply affected by ransomwares in the last few years. It poses a very huge risk and a threat to the global economy and as well as to the internet itself, right? So that is why to tackle ransomwares, there is this global initiative and there is a working group under it to build resilience amongst the countries and their concerned cybersecurity agencies. Every country will have its own cybersecurity agency. In the case of India, it is CERT-In. So India's CERT-In is currently leading this group. Is that clear? India's CERT-In and the National Security Council Secretariat. These institutions, these security agencies of India, they are leading this initiative at the global level. Currently, we are the head of the resilience working group. to build resilience amongst countries by sharing our expertise and sharing the required technology. That is why such exercises are needed. In this particular exercise, 13 countries took part in it. 13 nations were invited. Their respective cybersecurity agencies participated, along with our CERT-In and the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore. Is that clear? So this working group, the Resilience Working Group of International Counter Ransomware Initiative, is currently headed by India, and it is led by our National Security Council Secretariat. Even this could be a topic for your prelims, a potential topic. We'll discuss briefly about National Security Council as well. So first, understand what is Exercise Synergy. It was a cybersecurity exercise organized by India along with Singapore. 13 countries took part in it. It is part of the Resilience Working Group, which is under the International Counter Ransomware Initiative. The focus is on bringing these countries together so they can work together, identify the present threats, and design solutions to tackle the ransomware threat, to share expertise with each other, to share technology, to build coordination so that there could be a joint response. Because see, in the cyber domain, there is no distinction between national boundaries. Your national boundaries, territorial jurisdiction does not apply in the cyberspace, right? Cyberspace is a global network. It's a global decentralized peer-to-peer network. So if a particular malware is affecting a country, it will affect every other country. The impact of a malware is not limited to a particular country. It could affect the whole internet. It could affect every country. That is why coordination is very, very important. When there is a global threat, a global cyber threat, you need a coordinated response from various countries. That is why these exercises are so crucial. And if you look at the theme of this exercise, which was organized by India on 31st August, the theme was building network resiliency to counter ransomware attacks, to help other countries to build that resilience by working with them. The focus was on anticipating the future threats, building a forecasting system so you can constantly scan the cyberspace and look out for potential threats, build abilities to withstand the impact of these ransomware attacks, create resilience in your system, in your cyberspace, right? So that you can withstand the impact and quickly recover from the impact of these attacks. You have to build this capability within the government, within your private sector, and even amongst the people, right? Every internet user is a part of this ecosystem, be it a private company or a government organization or even an individual like you and me. So we should all be aware of these basic threats, including ransomwares, and we have to collaborate with the security agencies. We have to take basic precautions. We have to build that resilience in our cybersecurity ecosystem so that we can withstand these attacks and recover quickly with minimal downtime for our cyberspace. Understood? So now you need to get complete clarity on 3 topics here. One, you should know what is CERT-In, especially beginners, freshers who are just starting out their preparation. You should know what is CERT-In. You should know the basic facts. There can be a question here. So we're going to discuss this. Next, you should know what is a ransomware, right? What is it? What kind of a threat does it pose? How does it work? The basics of it. We need not get into the complete technical details, but the basics of ransomware. That is something you have to understand. And we'll also talk about the National Security Council, because the National Security Council Secretariat was in news. Because currently India is leading this resilience group and it is led by the National Security Council of India. Is that clear? So let's talk about CERT-In first. As I mentioned, this is India's nodal agency for defending and protecting the Indian cyberspace against all forms of cyber attacks. Is that clear? It is a civilian agency manned by civilians. Understood? It is manned by professionals, experts who have expertise in cybersecurity. It brings professionals both from the government and also from the private sector. That's why I said it's a civilian agency. It's not a military agency. Is that clear? It's not your traditional security agency. It's not manned just by police officers or intelligence officers or military officers. It is manned by civilians primarily, drawing expertise both from the government, from various government agencies and departments, right, including armed forces, police forces, intelligence agencies, etc., and also draws expertise from the private sector. So this institution has been set up under Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. You should know under which ministry these key institutions function. There could be a factual question on this. Is that clear? It was established in 2004 and it draws its legal backing, its legal mandate from the IT Act, which was amended in 2008. The Information Technology Act of 2000. This is our primary law dealing with cybercrime and cybersecurity. Is that clear? This is India's primary legal weapon against cybercrime and cybersecurity. This law was amended in 2008. This amendment provided for the establishment of CERT-In and gave a legal mandate to it. The organization had been set up 4 years earlier in 2004 itself. It was functioning from 2004. But it was given a legal status and a specific defined mandate through this amendment of the IT Act. That is where CERT-In draws its legal powers from. Is that clear? So IT Act has designated CERT-In as the nodal agency in India to deal with all cybersecurity threats. It is the primary agency to protect and defend India's cyberspace. Right? So as a part of this mandate, CERT-In constantly watches out for any emerging threats. It looks out for new viruses, new computer worms, trojans, or any such malware which is spreading in the global cyberspace. Right? It will look out for any vulnerabilities, any existing weaknesses in the cybersecurity architecture. It will identify if there are any security gaps in a particular hardware, right? In a particular device. It could be a mobile phone or a brand of a computer, right? Or within the hardware components, there could be security gaps which could be exploited by the attackers. Cyber attackers, they often exploit the vulnerabilities either in the hardware of your system or in the software, or maybe any weakness that is there in the network. So these vulnerabilities have to be identified and fixed. There could be a security gap in the software in your operating system, right? You might be using a Windows system or Mac or any other operating system, right? You might be using a lot of applications on your computer, on your mobile phones. They might all have security vulnerabilities. There might be gaps in their firewall which might be exploited by the attackers. Or there could be security gaps in the network that you are using, right? The way in which you are connected to the internet through a LAN network or through Wi-Fi, through broadband. The network itself might have security flaws. So these flaws have to be identified. These vulnerabilities, weaknesses have to be identified. That is the job of CERT-In. It looks out for these potential weak points, right? Across hardware, software, and across the network. Next, it scans the global cyberspace 24/7 throughout the year, every single day. 24/7, CERT-In looks out for the global cyberspace and sees if there are any new dangerous threats coming up, new types of attacks which might come up, or new malwares which are being deployed by cyber criminals or by state actors, right? There could be a new harmful virus, computer virus, or a computer worm, or a Trojan that is spreading. So to tackle them, CERT-In has an early warning system. It has put in place an early warning forecasting system. So it constantly scans the global cyberspace, identifies these threats and weaknesses, and immediately issues alerts to all the concerned stakeholders. It gives out an alert to all government agencies, private companies. It gives out a press release to the media, or even through social media, so that the common man, the public, are also aware about these new threats. Is that clear? Because the cyberspace is secure only when all the stakeholders are taking these basic safety measures. It's not just the government which is responsible here. Even the companies and the citizens, they should all have better awareness about cybersecurity. That is the job of CERT-In. It engages with the public, engages with the media, communicates these threats and gives out alerts so that there could be awareness amongst all the stakeholders, so that they could take the basic cybersecurity measures to protect their devices. Understood? This is the job of CERT-In. Now, since we are talking about our cybersecurity institutions, I would like to mention a few more institutions as well, which are also involved in cybersecurity. We have something known as, let me just open a new slide here. Let me just point out a few other cybersecurity organizations of India. Apart from CERT-In, which is the nodal agency, we have few more cybersecurity institutions. We have NCIIPC, National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center. I'll repeat, NCIIPC, National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center. It is responsible for defending our critical infrastructure, critical information infrastructure against cyber attacks. Now, what do you mean by critical infrastructure? It includes all the key infrastructure of our country, which is the backbone of our economy and national security. For example, the computer networks of government agencies, intelligence agencies, armed forces, key ministries like finance, home, foreign ministry, defense ministry, prime minister's office, right? All these government networks are part of our critical information infrastructure. Then key sectors of our economy like banking and financial system, right? Then power sector, then dams, nuclear power plants, thermal power plants, power grids, even your networks which control railway traffic, air traffic, stock exchanges, right? All these fall under the definition of critical information infrastructure. These are key sectors which are the backbone of our economy and security. It includes your mobile internet infrastructure as well, right? The power grids, then power plants, dams, airports, seaports as well, right? All this physical infrastructure I'm talking about, we refer to this physical infrastructure as critical infrastructure. So behind this physical infrastructure, there will be computer networks controlling them, operating them. So that is your critical information infrastructure. Is that clear? Just to give you an example, let's say there is a nuclear power plant. Let's take, for example, Kudankulam nuclear power plant. The power plant itself is a physical infrastructure, that is a critical infrastructure of our country, right? The computer networks which are operating and controlling that power plant, they constitute the critical information infrastructure of the country. Any attack on critical information infrastructure can be devastating, because through cyber attacks, through these virtual attacks, you can create a physical impact. It is possible to make two aircrafts crash through a cyber attack, right? By sending out wrong communication, by intercepting the codes, communication of ATCs, air traffic control systems, two aircrafts can be made to crash. A real attack can be carried out in the physical world. It is possible to bring down power grids. You can create a nuclear disaster in a nuclear plant by manipulating the computer systems which control them. So that is why critical infrastructure needs special protection. So for that, we have a dedicated institution called NCIIPC, National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center. It is functioning under NTRO, National Technical Research Organization, which is India's premier technical intelligence agency. It's a technical intelligence agency of India, NTRO. It functions under NTRO. Next, we have a dedicated armed force as well to deal with cyber wars. It's called the Defense Cyber Agency. It has been recently set up in 2018. It is a dedicated armed force of India. The other two are civilian agencies. CERT-In and NCIIPC are civilian agencies manned by civilians. But Defense Cyber Agency is an armed force. It's a military agency. It's a tri-service organization drawing officers from the Army, Navy, and the Air Force. It's a tri-service organization, the Defense Cyber Agency. It is responsible for both offensive cyber operations and defensive cyber operations. Is that clear? It is developing offensive and defensive cyber weapons for cyber warfare to defend India against a cyber war attempt by another country or by a terrorist group, right? Or it is also developing cyber offensive weapons to target another country, to wage a cyber war against another country. So Defense Cyber Agency is a newly constituted armed force. It's a branch of our armed forces, right? It's a tri-service organization. So these are some key points that you need to remember for any potential question on this topic, right? Now moving on, let me explain what is a ransomware. Let's understand what is a malware first, and let's also understand what is a ransomware. So that will help us complete this discussion. Malware is basically short form for malicious software. Basically, it is any software which has been designed with a malicious intention. It has been designed with an intention to carry out an attack. It is basically a code. It is a software code, right? But designed with a malicious intention. The intention could be to breach your privacy, to plant this malware in your phone or in your computer device so that they can steal your data, your confidential private data, or to watch, monitor, observe and carry out surveillance, right? Through malwares, it is possible to switch on your cameras, your microphones without your knowledge, right? To monitor the keystrokes that you're typing, to look at your browser history, right? So to carry out such monitoring, surveillance, malwares can be used to breach into your devices. This represents a breach of your privacy, your data security. This could be used to commit fraud, right? They could steal your identity itself. By getting hold of your basic details, right? They could steal your identity and wipe your records off, or use your identity for committing other crimes. Sell your data, your identity on the black market of the internet. That is the dark net. The dark net is a hidden, encrypted part of the internet. It is a hidden, encrypted part of the internet, which is functioning like a black market of the internet, where illicit activities take place. So cyber criminals, they might breach your systems with a malware, steal your data, steal your identity and sell it on the dark net. Is that clear? Or they could steal your money, right? They could get hold of your banking information, your account details, your net banking password or OTPs, or they could get hold of your credit card information, right? So once they have that information, they can steal all the money that you have in your account. Along with this, they can even blackmail you. They can extort. Since they have control over the system, right? They can lock your system, lock all the data that is there and demand money from the victim. They might steal your sensitive personal data and use it to blackmail the individual, right? Because this is very intimate data and people can be blackmailed, and they might extract a ransom from the victims. Through these malwares, they can even control the entire device, the way in which it functions, right? They can control the operations of that device and all the systems that it is connected to. That is how the functioning of a power plant can be altered through cyber attacks. A power plant can be shut down, power grids can be brought down, right? Railway traffic can be disrupted, aircraft crashes can be created. So a variety of threats emerge once the attacker breaches into your system. And to breach and to gain control of your device and to execute these malicious activities, they take the help of a malicious code, a malicious software, which is your malware. There are different types of malwares, like I said. You have virus, worms, trojans, etc. I want you to take this as an exercise. Take this as an assignment from me. After the session ends, please spend 10-15 minutes, it won't take more than that, and read about computer viruses, worms and trojans. Understand the differences, understand how they work, how they operate. Is that clear? So please take this as an exercise, as a homework, as an assignment for you. Now let me explain what is a ransomware. I think now you will be able to guess what is a ransomware. Ransomware is basically a malware which is extorting money through blackmail, which is demanding a ransom, money to be paid, because ransomwares are designed to encrypt your data and lock your system. Is that clear? A ransomware, once it breaches into your system, it will lock your system. It will encrypt all the data. And your system is locked. You will not be able to access it anymore. You can't access all the sensitive data that you have. The only way in which you can get the access back is by paying a ransom to the attacker. I'll briefly explain how it works, how it actually happens, how the attack is carried out. See, this malware, this malicious code, it is usually sent through the phishing route. Phishing is a type of a cyber attack. It is a method through which cyber attacks are carried out. It is a type of social engineering where the victim is manipulated. The victim's behavior, the victim's choice, decision making is manipulated through a carefully designed technique. That's why it's called a phishing attack, based on the word fishing. That is how you catch fish. You catch fish by using a bait. Correct? You use a bait to catch a fish. You're tricking the fish to believe that this is food. The fish latches onto the hook and you will catch hold of the fish. So something similar happens here in the virtual world. Victims are targeted with a bait. For example, you might receive an email which looks very authentic, which looks very official. It looks like you've got a mail from your company or from your college or from your bank, right? The URL, the logo, the banner, the color combination used, everything looks original. It looks almost official. It looks as if you've got a mail actually from the place you work or from the college you study or from the bank where you have an account. The moment you open the mail, right, you might be tricked to commit some action. You might be tricked to click on a link, or you might be tricked to download an attachment. So that is the bait they are offering. The moment you fall for the blade, right, the moment you fall for this clickbait, you will be taken to a page or it will download a harmful attachment which will unleash the malware on your system. Is that clear? The malware gets downloaded. The malware immediately takes over your system and encrypts all the data, all the files that are stored. Everything gets encrypted. You can't de-encrypt it. To de-encrypt, you need a key, right? Basically, it puts a lock. To open the lock, you need the key, and the key lies only with the attacker. So now the attacker will display a message. If you try to open your system or access a file, you will get a message saying you're a victim of a ransomware attack, your system is locked, your data is encrypted. If you want access, if you want your data and system back, you have to pay a ransom, right? The page will show how much money you should pay and how you should pay the money. The ransom is usually taken in cryptocurrencies like bitcoins. Because these cryptocurrencies, digital currencies, they offer a lot of anonymity, right? It's very difficult to trace. Hackers take payments only in digital currencies like bitcoins. So the address will be given, right? And the ransom you have to pay will be given. The moment you deliver the ransom, then they will give you the key to de-encrypt your system, to de-encrypt the data. So this is a ransomware attack. You're being held at ransom. The victim is held at ransom, and once you pay that ransom, once they have extorted money from you, then they will provide you the key to gain control of your system and data again. See, for individuals, this may not matter much. Let's say our laptop is brought under a ransomware attack. We may not have too much of sensitive data. Instead of paying the ransom, you might even throw the system and get a new laptop, right? But think if this happens for a big private organization or a government organization, what are the consequences? They cannot afford to lose the data, right? Let's say a key ministry, finance ministry, its systems are brought under a ransomware attack, all the data is locked up. They have no other choice but to pay the ransom, because if they try any other route, right, if they try to counter this, the chances are high the malware will erase all the data. It will wipe out the data. Imagine there is a pharmaceutical company, right, or a company involved in research and development. They have all precious data stored, all the data from studies on which they have spent millions or billions of dollars. Let's say a defense manufacturer who has stored all designs in their systems, right, or a biotech firm which has stored all the study data, trial data in their systems. They can't lose that at any cost. They would have invested millions and billions of dollars on it. Similarly, governments also can't afford to lose sensitive data. So once they are victims of ransomware attack, they will be forced to pay the ransom, right? So this has become a nightmare in the last few years because there have been many ransomware attacks. For example, in 2017, there was a very popular ransomware attack called WannaCry. It affected many countries, many organizations were affected. There was one more called Petya and NotPetya. All these were primarily ransomware attacks. Okay, I'm just naming a few examples. There are many more. Every year, there are plenty of ransomware attacks happening, and that is why governments are acting very, very seriously against ransomware attacks. Is that clear? Because it threatens cyber safety. It threatens individuals, it threatens companies, threatens the government itself. Sensitive data could be at risk, your economy could be at risk because of ransomware attacks. So that is why there is this international platform to bring countries together for a coordinated response, right? Under this platform, we have a resilience group, which is led by India currently. And it was a part of this. It was as a part of this that exercise Synergy was organized, so that we can work with various countries and come out with a coordinated response. I would like to give one last fact here before I end this topic. Studies have shown that most ransomware attacks are carried out through the phishing route. Please remember this fact. You never know, there could be a factual statement given by UPSC. The most common route through which ransomwares are inserted into the target device is through phishing emails, fraudulent emails which appear to look authentic and official. And the biggest target happens to be government organizations. Most of the ransomware attacks are targeted against government entities. Then comes the private sector. So remember these two facts. You never know, it could be important for a factual question in prelims. So I hope with this, we have completely understood ransomwares, CERT-in, and the basics of cybersecurity, right? So let's take a practice question here. A very simple question. Which of the following best describes a ransomware? Go through the options. I'll be launching the poll and you can answer the question. 30 seconds. In the meantime, I'll take a look at your questions and doubts. 20 seconds left. 10 seconds left. Okay, let's see how many of you have got it right. Very good, fantastic. 74%. 74% have got it right. The right answer is option C. It is an extortion malware that can lock your computer and then demand a ransom for its release. Great. Now let's see what the questions are. Sir, what is the homework you gave? The homework I gave, the assignment was read about different types of computer malware, especially computer viruses, computer worms, and Trojans. Please read about them. Sir, is Pegasus also a ransomware? No. Pegasus was a spying tool. Pegasus, which is a news, which reportedly has been developed by a Israeli cybersecurity firm, right? It is a spying tool. It allows the attacker to discreetly monitor your activities. It's not a ransomware. Is that clear? It's a spyware. It's a malware. It is a spyware. Once it is installed on your device, without your knowledge, the attacker can start monitoring what you're doing, right? Where you're going, your location. They can switch on the camera, switch on the microphone, listen to what you're speaking, watch what you're doing. They can even plant documents. They can download documents onto your device. So that is Pegasus. It is a spyware. So can you repeat fifth dimension of warfare? See, traditionally, right, if you go back, let's say before 1950s, traditionally there were three domains of warfare. Which are the three domains of warfare? Land, air, water. This is where traditionally wars are fought. On the land by your army, in the air by your air force, and on water or underwater by your navy. Then as there were advances in space technology, outer space, right, from 1950s, outer space became the fourth dimension of warfare. Countries developed spy satellites, they deployed ballistic missiles, which goes into outer space and comes back. They developed anti-satellite weapons. So space became the fourth dimension of warfare. Now, with emergence of computing, internet, telecommunication networks, there is a new dimension of warfare, that is cyberspace. Your cyber domain, the internet itself, is a domain where wars are being fought today, right? That's what I meant by the fifth dimension of warfare. Shankdweep is asking, sir, what's the difference between ransomware and malware? See, malware is a broad term. Malware refers to any malicious software. It includes ransomware, it includes virus, Trojan, worms. These are different malwares, right? And I explained what is a ransomware. It extracts money, it extorts money from you by locking your system. So ransomware is a type of a malware, just like virus and worms. Afla is asking, NTRO is under which ministry? NTRO, which is our Technical Intelligence Agency, until recently it was under RAW, Research and Analysis Wing, which is our Foreign Intelligence Agency. Recently it has been shifted from RAW and placed under the National Security Council. It reports directly to National Security Advisor. I also request subject experts to push more questions here, so it's easier to filter, because it would be tough to pick questions from the open section. So please push few more questions onto the sheet. Nancy is asking, sir, what is darknet? Darknet is a hidden part of the internet. It is encrypted. Normal people like you and me can't access it. You need special skills, special tools to access the hidden part of the internet. See, most of the internet we access, right, it's the open part. You type byju's.com, byju'sexamprep.is.com, or you type Google, facebook.com. Those URLs take you to the open part of the internet. Those pages are accessible publicly, freely. Once you have the address, the link, you can access that part of the internet. But there is a part of the internet which is hidden, which is not accessible to all of us, right? To access that, you need special skills and special routers and special encryption methods and techniques. So specialists who have trained in this, they access the darknet, and there you can hide your identity. You can conceal your location. You basically become anonymous on the darknet. And since you become anonymous, it is a hub of criminal activities. Cyber criminals, drug traffickers, arms traffickers, those who sell child pornography, right? Even terrorists, they all thrive in the darknet. Terrorists exchange money, they finance terrorism on the darknet. Is that clear? Darknet gives you that anonymity. You become an anonymous person there. You can't be traced back. Your identity location becomes anonymous. So darknet is a hidden part of the internet, encrypted part of the internet, which is a hub of illegal and illicit criminal activities. Vanshika is asking, what is social engineering? Social engineering is a method through which you manipulate a person. Through a certain method, you can manipulate the choices of a person. Now, let's say I'm not interested in watching a new movie which has released. Let's say there is a movie that has come out. I have no interest in watching it, right? But those who are marketing the movie, they might target certain ads on my device. And over a period of time, I might get convinced on my own to go and watch that movie. So my decision was manipulated by someone else without even me knowing about it, right? So that is social engineering. Is that clear? Let's say I don't want to vote for a particular party in this election, but through targeted advertisements, through targeted information on my device, slowly my thought process can be changed. My ideology, my thinking might be changed. I might be pushed towards that political ideology and I might be convinced on my own to go and vote for that party. So if that is done, right, through various methods, that is social engineering. That's what happens in phishing attacks. You don't want to open that mail or click on it, but you're deceived to do that. You're tricked into doing something, right? Your decision is manipulated. So that is social engineering. Great. Now let's move to the next topic. The third one, we'll be discussing about a nuclear plant which has been in news, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. I'm sure many of you would have heard about it. It's been frequently in news. But let's start this topic with a question. Let's do this the other way around. Instead of explaining everything and taking a question, let's take the question first, because it's a very simple question. The idea is to show you that these format of questions can also come. There can be map based questions, right? Places which are in news can come as a question. So take this question, I launch the poll. Let's see how many of you get it right, and then we'll discuss this topic in detail. Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, recently seen in news, is located in which country? Try and answer this. Is it in Kazakhstan, Russia, Ukraine, or Belarus? I gave 15 seconds. Now 7 seconds are left. 5. Done. So now let's see how many of you have got it right. Very good. Again, majority of them, 69%, are saying that option C is the right answer. Perfect. You're absolutely right. This nuclear power plant is in Ukraine. Let's see where it is located, why it is in news. This nuclear power plant, it's located in the southeastern part of Ukraine over here. Right? This is where intense fighting has been taking place between Russia and Ukraine. I'm sure you know that Russia invaded Ukraine earlier this year, and today conflict is mainly concentrated in the eastern part of Ukraine, that is in the Donetsk and Luhansk provinces. So Russia has primarily gained control over these territories, and Ukraine is trying to fight back. It's trying to liberate these regions from Russian occupation. So at the center of this conflict, there is a nuclear power plant that you see over here called the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. It's been making news since the beginning of this war. Since March 2022, this nuclear plant has been in news. And in the last few days, there has been a alarming development that has taken place. So in that context, let's understand everything about this power plant, the risk that was created recently, and what can be done in case the risk turns into an actual disaster. Right? So there are some key aspects of nuclear safety that we have to discuss. There are some important facts and concepts, and we'll cover everything in detail in the next 15 minutes. As I mentioned, it is a nuclear power plant in Ukraine, right? Ever since the war started, there is a fear. There has been alarm around the world that the war might result in a nuclear disaster at this power plant. As you know, any incident at a nuclear power plant can lead to radiation leakage, right? The nuclear reactor, if it were to be damaged, if the reactor core, which consists of radioactive material, right? If it were to be damaged during an attack, there could be leakage of nuclear radiation. It could result in a nuclear accident, a nuclear disaster. The world has seen a few nuclear incidents. In case of war, we have seen only one instance of nuclear warfare, right? That is US dropping nuclear bombs on Hiroshima, Nagasaki to end the Second World War. That's the only instance of nuclear warfare. But there have been nuclear accidents that have happened. At nuclear power plants, accidents have happened. There was one in the US a few decades back called the 3 Mile Island incident. Due to malfunctioning of the reactor, there was a nuclear incident that happened in the United States many years back in 1970s, right, at a place called 3 Mile Island. It led to nuclear leakage of nuclear radiation, and harmed many people. But the biggest of all disasters has to be Chernobyl, again located in Ukraine. Back then it was in Soviet Union, right? This was in 1980s. Due to malfunctioning and negligence and poor maintenance, there was a complete meltdown of the nuclear reactor at Chernobyl, right, which is in Ukraine. And this is the biggest nuclear incident we have seen in the civilian domain. Back then, Ukraine was part of Soviet Union. So many people were killed. It affected across Europe. Radiation was reported, right? Millions of people have been affected by Chernobyl disaster. Even today, Chernobyl and the areas around it, it's a dangerous zone because radioactive elements, they have a very long shelf life, right? So radiation is still reported in those areas. That is the impact of nuclear radiation. It leads to genetic mutations, right? Immediate exposure can result in immediate death as well. It leads to a very horrible death. And low level exposure can lead to long-term impact. It can lead to cancer, can lead to genetic mutations, affect fertility. The fetuses can be very badly affected. So it has a generational impact, right? Another incident which comes to mind, which is a more recent incident, is the Fukushima disaster in Japan. In Japan, in 2011, there was a tsunami triggered by an earthquake. This tsunami flooded a nuclear power plant called Fukushima Nuclear Power Plant. Because of the flooding, the electrical systems were disabled. There was power loss at the power plant and the cooling systems failed. See, for nuclear reactors, cooling systems are absolutely critical because they generate massive amounts of heat, right? The atomic reaction releases a lot of energy, and you're talking about temperatures in the range of thousands of degrees Celsius. So to make this a controlled reaction, you need cooling agents, you need coolants to cool down the reactor. And the cooling system runs on electricity. Of course, there will be backups, but all the backup electrical systems failed at Fukushima during the tsunami, during the flooding that happened. As a result, the coolant systems failed and the nuclear reactor melted at Fukushima. It led to large-scale radiation leakage and long-term damage in the region. We are potentially staring at a similar event in Ukraine because Russian and Ukrainian forces are aggressively fighting near this power plant. Since many months, aggressive fighting is being reported here. Both the sides, they are opening fire. They have launched rockets and mortars at each other. Even missiles and drones have landed near the nuclear power plant. Now imagine if this were to hit the core of the reactor. It could result in a devastating explosion, or it could result in failure of the electrical systems and lead to a meltdown of the core of the reactor, right? Just a few days back, things really escalated here as both the sides were fighting, and it has led to significant and considerable damage to the power plant. So this gave rise to an alarm around the world whether it will result in a nuclear disaster, whether there is radiation leakage happening. So that is why an international institution called IAEA got immediately involved. I'll explain what is IAEA. IAEA visited the site to inspect for any damage, to look out for radiation leakage, and Ukraine even started distributing anti-radiation pills to the people. to protect them against harmful radiation. So there are some key concepts that we need to understand here. We have to talk about nuclear safety in general. There can be a conceptual science question. You should understand about IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. There could be a IR question, an international relations question here. You should also understand about anti-radiation pills, which were distributed by Ukraine. It was widely covered in newspapers. So these are some important topics we have to cover. First, let's focus on nuclear safety. See, now we already understood the consequences of a nuclear disaster, right? What might happen and what kind of incidents have happened in the past. So based on this, it is pretty obvious that nuclear safety should be a top priority for any nuclear power. Any country which is working in the field of nuclear technology, which has nuclear power plants, nuclear weapons, they have to give utmost priority for safety and security, because you cannot afford an accident. You cannot afford a disaster here, because the consequences can be devastating. It can be long term, right? So that is why, with regard to power plants, the modern nuclear reactors that we have, which generate electricity, they are designed to be foolproof. As much as possible, they are designed to be foolproof, and they have the resilience, inbuilt resilience, to withstand the impact of shock events and disasters. The design of the structure itself is such that it can withstand the impact of various disasters. Nuclear power plants are made earthquake proof. There are physical measures to prevent flooding. Is that clear? They are reinforced with concrete and steel. There will be multiple walls of concrete and steel around the reactor, around the coolant pool, to prevent any accidental leakage. Is that clear? Very thick concrete walls and steel structure would be built so that it can contain any radiation if there is a damage. So such basic measures are already in place. These are some basic safety measures that are taken. But you never know whether this is fully sufficient. What if a missile, powerful missile, hits the building, right? The concrete structure may not be able to withstand, right? Or what if there is a massive tsunami like it happened in Japan? All your design and the foolproof systems you have created might go for a toss, and it could eventually turn into a disaster. Your reactors might be resistant to earthquakes, but there is no guarantee, absolute guarantee, that it can withstand a high magnitude earthquake, right? Despite the best measures you have taken, there are chances of nuclear accidents happening. So that is why wars pose a great risk for nuclear power plants. Is that clear? One accidental hit or even a deliberate hit, one country might try to frame the other. Ukraine might try to blame Russia and deliberately damage the reactor, or Russia might do the same to bring pressure on Ukraine. Or criminals or terrorists, they might try to steal nuclear material. Since there is complete chaos in the war zone, right? There is no one to guard the nuclear material. Terrorists or criminals could try to steal the nuclear reactor, the core of the material, to try and sell it in the black market. So many risks are present over here. That is why this topic is so very important. Since heavy fighting is taking place, nuclear safety and security has become a top focus, a top concern for every country, for every concerned institution. Is that clear? As I mentioned, loss of electricity is a very real threat. Because of all the fighting, if the electrical systems are damaged, if the power backup, the generators, if they're all destroyed and taken offline, the cooling systems will start to fail, like it happened in Fukushima. Generally, these systems have redundancy built into them. That is, even if one system fails, there will be a backup to take care of it. Even for the backup, there will be one more backup. So multiple redundancies would be inbuilt. Considering the risk, there will be multiple safety nets. But due to heavy fighting, your backup systems might fail. The redundancy might be erased. And there are chances that the reactor itself would start failing, right? So that is why it's very, very important to ensure that there is no disruption of power and there is no physical damage to the power plant. These are the top priorities right now. There should be no physical damage to the plant itself, and the power systems have to keep running, right? These are the priorities right now. So in this regard, with regard to nuclear safety and nuclear security, we have an international organization that is responsible for it. It's called IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency. Please remember this, it's very, very important. IAEA or International Atomic Energy Agency. Its mandate is to promote nuclear safety and security and to promote the peaceful usage of nuclear technology. It is responsible for preventing nuclear proliferation. That is to prevent nuclear material, nuclear technology from falling into the wrong hands. What if a terror group gets hold of nuclear material? What if a rogue country gets hold of nuclear technology, right? So to prevent that leakage, to prevent that proliferation, IAEA is responsible. It has a mandate to work towards nuclear disarmament, to eventually disarm the world of nuclear weapons and use nuclear technology only for peaceful purposes. That is for generating electricity, for treating cancer, etc. Right? So that is why we have this international agency, and it is a autonomous intergovernmental body. It's been set up by various governments coming together. It's an autonomous independent organization. It's an intergovernmental organization. Please note, it is not part of the UN. It does not belong to UN. It's an independent autonomous organization based out of Vienna in Austria. That is where it is headquartered. So it's an independent organization, but it reports to UN. It only submits reports to UN General Assembly and UN Security Council. It reports to both the organizations, but it is not a part of the UN. It's not a UN agency. It's not a UN organization. Please understand this. It's an autonomous independent organization. It was set up in the year 1957 based on the suggestion of then US President Eisenhower, Dwight Eisenhower, who gave a very important speech on nuclear safety and promotion of nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. He delivered the speech called Atoms for Peace. It's a very popular speech, a very popular phrase as well. So based on this suggestion that we should have a global organization to promote nuclear safety, this organization was created, and initially it was known by the same name. It was called Atoms for Peace. That was the initial name. Later it was renamed as IAEA and it became the International Atomic Energy Agency. India, of course, is a member. We are a founding member of IAEA. We have been a member since its founding, since 1957, and it is completely aligned with the principles of Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, which tries to prevent the proliferation and leakage of nuclear technology, right? So this is the mandate of IAEA, to promote nuclear safety and security. So as a part of its duty, what it does is that it comes out with standards, safety standards, security standards. It comes out with suggestions, recommendations, and they have to be followed by all the member countries. Any country which is working in the nuclear domain, they have to follow the standards prescribed by IAEA. Right? In all their nuclear plants, in the entire process, they have to implement those safety security standards. And to check whether countries are following this, it has the powers to review and inspect. Please remember these 2 points. This is the role of IAEA. First, it is responsible for setting safety standards. How should a reactor be built? What are the basic safety measures? right? What security measures have to be taken? These suggestions are to be followed by the members. And second, to check whether countries are following, it has the powers to review and inspect. It can send inspectors to inspect the nuclear power plants to see whether they are following these standards. This organization has performed a phenomenal role over the years, and in recognition of this, it was even awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2005. The credit goes to then Director General Mohammad El Bardai, a very popular figure in the field of nuclear technology, nuclear safety. He was the DG of this organization. He was heading IAEA at that point. They played a big role in promoting nuclear non-proliferation, in promoting nuclear safety and security. So that is why the organization was recognized with the Nobel Peace Prize. It has played a role in monitoring the nuclear weapons program of North Korea, Iran, Libya, right? It has played a very big role in tackling nuclear proliferation. So in recognition of these efforts, it was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize as well. So this organization has the powers to verify, and it also provides technical support and technical assistance. So here UPSC could ask you a prelims question. What is the role of IAEA? Right? In the options, there might be nuclear safety and security, providing technical suggestions and assistance, setting standards for safety and security, carrying out verification to review and inspect, right? So all these are the roles and tasks performed by IAEA. Please remember these roles. There could be a question here. So India is a member of the IAEA. We have even been part of the Board of Governors. India is strongly committed towards nuclear disarmament and nuclear non-proliferation. Even though we haven't signed NPT, that's a different argument, right? We will never sign NPT because it's a discriminatory treaty. NPT allows only few countries to possess nuclear weapons, only P5 countries, the 5 permanent members of UN Security Council, that is US, Russia, China, UK and France. Only these 5 are allowed to possess nuclear weapons. No one else can possess nuclear weapons if they sign NPT. So India wants to retain the option of developing and deploying nuclear weapons. So we have sworn that we will never sign NPT because it's a discriminatory treaty. Even though we haven't signed NPT, we have a very strong commitment to nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. So India has contributed to these efforts. We have signed essential agreements like CSA, Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement, and we have opened up our civilian reactors for inspection. Is that clear? You have to sign 2 agreements with IAEA. The countries, the members have to sign 2 agreements. One is CSA, Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement. By signing this, you are committing that you are going to follow the IAEA standards and safety measures, and you will allow IAEA inspectors to come to your country to inspect your nuclear facilities every now and then, right? Second one is the additional protocol to it. Once you sign these 2 agreements, you have to open up your civilian nuclear facilities for inspection by IAEA inspectors. Every year, they'll conduct an audit, a review to see whether you're following all the safety measures and protocols. So India is committed to this. We have signed both the agreements and we have opened up ourselves to IAEA inspection. Now coming to the last point here, anti-radiation pills. What is it? See, when you're exposed to nuclear radiation, right, one of the primary radiations which will affect is radioactive iodine. Is that clear? Radioactive iodine can be very, very dangerous. See, our bodies need iodine to survive and sustain. Our thyroid gland requires iodine. I'm sure you would be aware of the importance of thyroid gland. It controls metabolism. It controls key functions, including hormonal functions, right? So iodine supply is needed for our body, but the iodine we consume through salt and through various dietary items, it is non-radioactive. Is that clear? we consume non-radioactive iodine to support our thyroid functions. But if your body is exposed to radioactive iodine, then your thyroid gland will absorb it. It will get saturated because the thyroid gland cannot distinguish between radioactive iodine and non-radioactive iodine. Once it is saturated, right, it will completely disrupt your bodily functions and eventually leads to cancer. Is that clear? So when you're exposed to radiation in very close range, when you're very close to the radiation, when let's say there is a nuclear explosion that happened and you're very close to that, you're in the blast radius, then the damage is irreparable, right? Your skin will peel off and you'll go through a lot of suffering and it's a very horrible death. Death is assured in that case. But let's say you're far away, you're hundreds of kilometers away, but still the radiation can travel through the atmosphere, through the air, right? This radiation will settle down. The radioactive ions will settle down. If it settles down on your skin, let's say, immediately if you take a step, you can wash it off with water and soap. You can remove the radioactive ions. But if you ingest it, because radioactive ions will fall everywhere, it will enter the soil, it will enter the water, it will enter the food you are consuming, vegetables, meat, everything will get poisoned with radioactive iodine. So when you consume that, when you ingest it, you're going to directly take that iodine in, radioactive iodine, and it is going to disrupt your functioning of thyroid gland. It's a very, very serious risk. It's a great health hazard. It will lead to cancer. And hence, there is one preventive step available here, right? What you can do is, you can take a tablet of potassium iodide or Ki. Potassium iodide is basically your anti-radiation pill. This is often distributed whenever a radiation leakage is suspected. Those who work in these plants, people who reside nearby, they're all given radioactive or anti-radiation pills, which is basically made up of potassium iodide. So please note down this important fact. Anti-radiation pills are made up of potassium iodide. The iodine in the tablet here is non-radioactive. How it works is that when you take these tablets, you will saturate your thyroid gland with non-radioactive iodine. Your thyroid gland will absorb all the iodine from the tablet. So even when you get exposed to radioactive iodine, your thyroid gland will no longer absorb it because the gland is already saturated with non-radioactive iodine. So you take 1 or 2 tablets every day, and for few hours, your thyroid gland is saturated with iodine. That is safe iodine, non-radioactive iodine. So even if you have ingested radioactive iodine, it will not be absorbed by the thyroid gland. That is the concept here, the principle. But of course, it is not 100% effective. If you have a direct exposure, there's nothing the tablet can do, right? And also if you miss the dosage or if your body has already ingested it, then the tablet will not work. It's only a preventive step, a precautionary step, right? So this is about anti-radiation pills, which were distributed by the Ukrainian government as a precautionary step. So please remember these concepts and these basic facts that I have discussed. You can definitely expect a question over here. Okay, let's take a few questions here. A student is asking, sir, what are mortars? Mortar is an explosive. It's a type of explosive which is launched by these small barrels like a gun. Mortars can fly for a certain range. They might have a range of 20, 30, 40 kilometers, right? It's a short range explosive device. It's like a grenade which is thrown with a hand, right? This is propelled through a tube, like a gun-like mechanism is used to propel the mortar a certain distance. It can fly around 20, 30, 40 kilometers and then explodes, right? So it's an explosive device. It's a shorter version. You can say it's a shorter version of a rocket or a missile. Rockets and missiles travel much larger distances. Mortars are fired usually in border areas where the fighting is taking place in close ranges, right? It's used to target enemy troops. So it's an explosive device that is propelled into the air, and it can be fired up to a certain distance. Next, a student is asking, sir, there are several Telegram groups. Are these authentic? Can we join these groups? See, we have launched our own official Telegram channel, right? So go and search Byju's Exam Prep IAS. You'll find the official channel. So please join that. The rest are all unofficial groups, non-official groups. So identify the official channel. Go to our YouTube channel as well. We have given the link. Go to our BEP website. Even there you'll find the link. In our YouTube videos below in the description, we have added the link for our Telegram channel. So that is the official channel you have to join. Next, are there any harms associated with taking anti-radiation pills? Not much. There might be slight side effects, right? Even an overdose of iodine might be bad. But if you compare it with the radiation risk, if you carry out a cost to benefit analysis, it's better to take the pill if you're getting exposed to nuclear radiation. If you simply consume the pill, yes, there will be side effects because you'll be overdosing yourself with iodine. Okay, let's see if there are a few more questions. Varman is asking, sir, doesn't the radiation affect other parts of the body or does it affect only thyroid gland? It's a very good question. Radiation affects every part of the body, but we don't have measures to protect other parts of the other organs of the body, at least with regard to iodine radiation and thyroid gland. We take this measure by using anti-radiation pills. That's why I said if you're very close in the close range of the nuclear incident, chances are high you'll die. There's no point in taking any measure there, right? So if you're already exposed to it, that too in a very large quantity, right? There's no preventive measure there. If you're far away, right, and if you have a chance of getting exposed, there you take this measure just to protect the thyroid gland. But other parts will be exposed. Yes, if you're ingesting radioactive components, yes, it might affect. But if it falls in the skin, if you wash off regularly with soap and water, you can remove the radioactive substances. So that's how it works. Okay. So guys, now let's move on. Next, we have two small topics. One is the Artemis 1 mission, and we'll also talk about ozone, the ozone hole and how it is recovering, which has been in news. So first, we'll discuss this important topic from space technology, Artemis 1 mission of NASA. It was widely covered in newspapers, right? NASA tried to launch this ambitious mission to the moon. It's a lunar mission, and it was named Artemis 1. You can see here in the image, this is the Artemis 1 rocket. The payload it was carrying was the Orion spacecraft, right? This is a test. This was supposed to be a test launch. NASA is trying to go back to the moon and place humans back on the moon. I'm sure most of you would know that the last time that human beings landed on moon was in 1970s. During the Cold War era, right? NASA launched several missions under the Apollo series and placed many astronauts on the moon during this period between 1969 and 1972. Starting with Neil Armstrong, right? Many astronauts landed on the moon, performed few basic experiments, collected few samples as well, and they came back. This was historic. It was unheard of. It was unprecedented because humans reaching the moon at that point was absolutely stunning. But since then, no country has attempted to go back to the moon. Missions have been launched to place satellites, orbiters, to put landers and rovers, right? Even India went to the moon through its Chandrayaan mission. But the point is, after the Apollo mission, the last Apollo mission in 1972, humans have not returned to the moon. So now NASA is bringing this back, and it's a very, very ambitious program to place astronauts back on the moon. And the launch, the prototype, was being tested through the Artemis 1 mission. So this will be a series of missions which will happen over the next few years, beginning from 2023. Hopefully, if everything goes well, by next year or max by 2024, astronauts will be back on the moon. So to prepare for that, right, you have to develop critical technologies and test them. They have to be foolproof. You're putting human lives at risk. So NASA is carrying out few tests. This was the first test launch that was supposed to happen last week. But unfortunately, due to technical glitches and leakage of fuel, the mission has been postponed by a few weeks. Maybe the launch might happen next month. So in this test launch, there were no humans, no astronauts. Only dummies are being carried in the Orion spacecraft. But it will establish the technology. It will prove the platform, and within a year or two, astronauts will start flying to the moon one after the other. Multiple missions are planned. And this time, our moon exploration can be more comprehensive. See, you need to understand the significance of this. Back in 1960s and 70s, our technology was very limited. Even though we managed to reach the moon, the experiments we could do, right, the research we could carry out was very limited. We didn't have the kind of supercomputers we have today. We didn't have artificial intelligence back then, right? The advances we have made in medical sciences, in physics, in chemistry, it's unprecedented. These advances, these technologies were not there back then. Even though humans landed, the experiments they performed were basic, were very minimal. Even though they got lunar samples back, right? The analysis was not very comprehensive because we didn't have sophisticated technology. The Apollo missions, they were primarily driven by geopolitics, not by science. This is a very important analysis you need to understand, even for your mains. Apollo missions of 1960s and 70s, they were driven by geopolitical considerations because this was the Cold War era where US and Soviet Union were competing aggressively in every domain. And since Soviet Union became the first country to reach space by launching Sputnik, right, the Sputnik satellite, it triggered an arms race and a space race from the US because there was intense competition between these two rivals, US and Soviet Union. So when Soviet Union became the first to reach space, US announced that it will place humans on the moon. The then president, John F. Kennedy, in 1961, he made a public announcement, right, setting an ambitious goal for NASA that we are going to place humans on the moon to beat Soviet Union. So this became a national agenda for US. The priority was just to reach the moon safely, put humans and bring them back. The priority was not science. Priority was not exploration. Priority was not research. Priority was geopolitics, winning the space war, taking a leap ahead of the Soviet Union. This was their priority. So what Apollo missions achieved in terms of science and research was very limited. No doubt it was a landmark, unprecedented achievement for human beings, but still, what could have been achieved, right? The potential was never reached because science was not the focus, geopolitics was the focus. So now we have the base, we have the advances, we have the science and technology, the resources needed. We have come a very long way compared to then, and today we can do much more if we are able to reach the moon, right? We can think of making human settlements on the moon, or exploring minerals and resources, or creating a base on the moon for future space explorations further away into outer space, right? There could be a base station on the moon from where missions could be launched further into outer space. All these possibilities exist. So to lay the foundation, NASA has taken a step with its Artemis series of missions. This is the first launch which is expected to take place. It was supposed to happen last week itself, but due to the glitch, the mission has been postponed. Is that clear? So in the first mission, NASA is just trying to reach the moon and come back. Like I said, no humans, no astronauts are being carried. The launcher you saw, the rocket, will fire off the Orion spacecraft into the lunar orbit. It will reach the lunar orbit in a few days, in a couple of days. It will orbit the moon like a satellite. There is no lander, no rover, right? It's not a very sophisticated payload. It's a very basic payload. It will orbit the moon, and within a month, it will come back to Earth and land safely in the Pacific. So all the technologies are being tested that are needed for human space flight. Is that clear? So that is where the importance of this mission lies. It is going to set the stage for the future of space exploration. Now, it is very important for India as well. India is closely watching this because even we have lined up our Gaganyaan mission, which is all set to become our first human space flight. Correct? ISRO has taken up the human space flight program, and Gaganyaan would be our mission. So there exists a potential, a possibility where India US might collaborate. Right? It is still not there on the table, but down the line, India US are close to each other, so there could be collaboration in the human space flight program. So that is where the importance of the mission lies. And even though the technical details are not needed, you need not sit and mug up the facts and the basic statistics of the rocket, the launcher. They are not needed, but you need to understand the importance, the significance of the mission, right? And some of the basic details that we have discussed. Is that clear? So that is what makes this topic important for your prelims, because UPSC has always preferred topics from space technology. Key developments in space tech can always come as a question. There have been many examples of that. Advances by NASA, European Space Agency, right? They could always come as a question. So take this as a practice question. Artemis mission of NASA is set to fulfill which of the following objectives? Please read. I'll launch the poll in the meantime. The poll is live, 15 seconds. The mission plans to return humans to the moon for furthering space exploration, to lay the foundations for more complex and ambitious missions to the moon and beyond, or promote space cooperation between US and all the spacefaring countries. Which of them is correct? Okay, this time there is a tight competition here. Some of them have been confused a little with the third statement, but majority of them have got it right. 45% say that option B is the correct answer. You're absolutely right. 1 and 2 only. See, statements 1 and 2 are correct. That's what we have been discussing all the while. Third statement is not correct. I said there is a potential for collaboration. This is not the objective right now. NASA is doing it on its own. Right now, it is not looking at space cooperation with all the countries. Right? That's an extreme statement. So clearly you can rule it out. So 1 and 2, B is the right answer. Okay. Now let's move to the last topic, and I'll take all your doubts and questions again at the end of the session. Right? Let's finish both the topics that are there. We covered Artemis 1. Now we are coming to the last topic of the day, ozone recovery. It's again a small discussion, but we'll try to cover all the key details, and then I can take up all your remaining doubts and questions. Now, why was this topic in news, or what is the importance of this development? Right? That is something we need to understand. Ozone, or O3, as you know, it is mainly present in the stratosphere. Right? Above the troposphere, you have your stratosphere in the upper reaches of the atmosphere. That is where you have ozone concentrated, and we call it the ozone layer. It basically envelops the earth. It's like a cover, a shield surrounding the earth. And literally it is a shield because it is shielding us from harmful UV radiation emitted by the sun. I'm sure this is something all of you are aware of. You would have studied this from your school days, right? Ozone layer is like a protective shield. In the solar radiation that we receive, the insolation that we receive, there are harmful UV rays, right? And if they enter the atmosphere and strike the surface, there would be no life on Earth. Life would be impossible. Because if we humans, plants, animals, if our ecosystems, they are exposed to this harmful UV rays, it will lead to genetic changes, genetic mutations. It could lead to skin cancer. It can cause cataract of the eye, right? Plant growth will be affected. Photosynthesis will be affected. Functioning, bodily functions of both humans and animals will be affected, right? So basically, life cannot survive on Earth without the ozone layer. Is that clear? One reason why life exists, life took root on Earth, is because there was a natural shield in the form of the ozone layer. But human activities, as it always does, ended up endangering this natural barrier. Anthropogenic activities, human activities, posed a very, very serious risk, and we were heading towards the complete collapse of the ozone layer, especially in the polar areas. Let me give you a brief summary of what happened, why this threat came up, what was the reason, what were the factors which contributed to it, right? And what have we done to address the challenge? But before that, let me tell you why this development is in news. Last week, it was reported by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration of the US, which is a scientific organization of the US that monitors oceans and atmosphere. It conducts oceanic and atmospheric research. This key institution came out with a press release. It came out with a report that said ozone hole is recovering at a faster rate than expected, and it has crossed a significant milestone. The damage that we had caused through industrial activities has been reversed, and today the ozone hole has been recovering. And in a few decades, this hole which has developed over the Antarctic, over the polar areas, and also over the mid latitudes, it is repairing itself, and in a few decades, ozone hole will be completely erased. The ozone layer is going to rebuild itself. So this is where we have to understand the process, the factors, and the technicalities behind it. But before I proceed with the discussion, let me give you an important fact. The thickness of ozone layer is measured with a unit called the Dobson unit. Please write it down. The thickness of the ozone layer in the stratosphere is measured with a unit called the Dobson unit. An important fact for your prelims. Now, let's understand the formation of the ozone hole. What really happened? See, in 1970s, there was extensive research going on with regard to atmospheric studies, outer space research, etc. So accidentally, a group of researchers, they discovered that there was excess UV radiation that was entering the Earth all of a sudden. Further studies showed that the ozone layer, which was filtering the harmful UV rays, has been ruptured. A gap has developed in the ozone layer, specifically in the polar areas, both in the Arctic and the Antarctic. And the hole was much larger in the Antarctic region. Later studies revealed that an ozone hole was developing in the mid latitudes, in the middle parts of the Earth as well, between the polar areas. So now the concern was, what was causing it? Was it natural or was it triggered by human activities? So every country got worried. The international community was alarmed, and extensive research was funded. So after years of research, it was established in 1970s and 1980s that we humans are responsible for this. Especially few industries like air conditioning, refrigeration, etc., where a substance known as CFC, chlorofluorocarbon, is used. CFCs or chlorofluorocarbons, right? They are used in these industries very widely, in air conditioning, refrigeration, even in your spray cans, pressurized cans, right? Usually it is a cooling agent. These CFCs eventually get released into the atmosphere. They travel high up into the stratosphere and they go through a breakdown. When the CFC molecule breaks down, it releases a free chlorine radical. These free chlorine radicals, they linger in the stratosphere. The wind currents take them towards the poles and they sit on these clouds which form in the polar areas, which are at very, very low temperatures, and in the presence of sunlight, it triggers a reaction. The ozone interacts with the free chlorine radical and breaks down completely, and this disrupts the formation of ozone. See, ozone has established a permanent cycle of creation and destruction. This is a natural cycle. In the presence of sunlight, oxygen molecules, they keep interacting in the stratosphere to form ozone, and the same ozone gets destroyed as well. This is a natural process. There is an equilibrium between the creation and destruction. So that is why you have a permanent ozone layer. But we have accelerated the destruction process and slowed down the creation process, and hence a ozone hole started developing. The culprit was CFC, chlorofluorocarbons, released by all these industries. So immediately the global community got together and they started thinking about what to do, and governments adopted a very important convention called the Vienna Convention. Please write down these key points. Vienna Convention provided a platform to discuss measures to protect our ozone layer. This was in the year 1985. Based on this convention, countries negotiated an agreement, a very critical agreement called the Montreal Protocol of 1987. This agreement provided for the elimination of CFCs. The target was to eliminate CFCs by phasing out their usage. Gradually, the objective was to phase it down, reduce the usage and eliminate it eventually, and replace it with a non-ozone depleting substance. Is that clear? CFC is a ozone depleting substance, ODS. So the objective was to phase down the usage in order to minimize the economic impact of the transition, to reduce the losses for the industry, so that slowly you can phase it out, eliminate it eventually by replacing it with a safer alternative. The alternative was primarily HFCs and HCFCs, hydrofluorocarbons and hydrochlorofluorocarbons. These were the safer alternatives, especially HFCs. They are non-ozone depleting. They don't contribute to ozone depletion. Then that became the replacement. So immediately, most countries adopted it, and very soon it became the first agreement in the world adopted by every country. It reached universal ratification. Every country signed and ratified it, and that shows the importance of this agreement. Today, thanks to this agreement, we have eliminated CFCs almost entirely. Is that clear? And thanks to the enforcement of this protocol, the ozone hole has started to repair. Is that clear? Studies have clearly proven that the ozone hole is reducing, it is shrinking year by year because of the measures that we have taken. The graph here clearly shows that, both in the polar areas and in the mid latitudes, right? The ozone depleting index registers a significant decline in the last 20 to 30 years. The entire credit goes to Montreal Protocol. Once the Montreal Protocol was enforced, you see a drastic decline in the depleting gas index, the ozone depleting gas index. It's an index to measure the depletion of the ozone layer. So here you make a very important observation. The depletion rate, the rate at which the depletion has been arrested, the rate at which ozone layer is being rebuilt, it is faster in the mid latitudes and relatively slower in the polar areas. Is that clear? Please remember this analysis. I'll explain why as well, and with that we bring our session to an end. The analysis is that studies have shown that repair of the ozone hole, right, or the fall in the depleting gas index is faster in mid latitude, meaning the repair is happening faster in the mid latitude and the repair is slower in the polar areas. Why? I'll explain. See, the reason is the age of the stratospheric air, right? The ozone present in the stratosphere, the age varies from mid latitudes to polar areas. This depends on air circulation, the pattern in which the wind currents are circulating. and the period for which that column of air remains in that region. See, there is a constant exchange of the gases that takes place, right? In the mid latitudes, the age or the relative time period of the stratospheric air in the mid latitude, in the tropical, subtropical areas and in the temperate areas is around 3 years. A particular column of air remains there for around 3 years, whereas the same in polar areas, especially in Antarctic, stays for 5.5 years. So the chances of free chlorine radicals staying in the polar areas is more. The duration is longer compared to the mid latitudes. Mid latitudes, the duration is less. The air will interact and it will come down, it will sink down very quickly within 3 years. So because of this, the hole is taking more time to repair in the polar areas. And also understand, in polar areas, the ideal conditions exist for the breakdown of the ozone. All ideal conditions for breaking down ozone is present, whereas it is lesser in the mid latitudes. So that is why the repair is faster in the mid latitudes compared to the polar areas. Is that clear? In the Antarctic region, the ozone hole has fallen only by 26%. The presence of ozone depleting substances, the concentration of these ozone depleting chemicals, it has reduced just by 26%. In mid latitudes, it is more than 50%. So that is why the difference. So according to estimates, the ozone layer will be fully repaired in the mid latitudes by 2049. By the middle of the century, ozone hole will be fully repaired in the mid latitudes. But in Antarctic, in the polar areas, it will take more time, and it might take until 2076 to reach the thickness of 1980 levels. That is before the CFC dam had started. Is that clear? This is what you should remember. And the latest development is that according to NOAA of US, ozone recovery has crossed an important milestone. We are getting closer to repairing the ozone layer, and it is all thanks to the Montreal Protocol. Is that clear? Now, I'll give you one last fact and also one more assignment. The replacement that we brought in, HFCs, which replaced CFCs, even though it is a non-ozone depleting substance, it created one more problem, unexpected problem. It was a dangerous greenhouse gas. I'll repeat. Montreal Protocol replaced CFCs with HFCs. As I mentioned, HFC is non-ozone depleting, doesn't contribute to ozone depletion. The problem is, it turned out to be a dangerous greenhouse gas. Its global warming potential is many, many times higher than even carbon dioxide and methane. Single-handedly, it is contributing for global warming today. So to address this new problem, new challenge, the Kigali Amendment was brought out for Montreal Protocol in 2016. The Kigali Amendment, please remember this. Kigali Amendment currently is focused on removing HFCs, eliminating HFCs, because it's a dangerous greenhouse gas. This alone will contribute to a rise in temperature of around 1 degree Celsius if we don't take action. That is why Kigali Amendment was introduced to Montreal Protocol to replace HFCs. Is that clear? So with this, let's take the practice question. Please go through the statements. I'll launch the poll and we'll also discuss your doubts before we end the session for today. 15 seconds. Question says, while CFCs caused ozone depletion, its replacement HFCs have contributed to global warming. In 2016, Kigali Amendment was adopted to phase down HFCs. That's what I mentioned. This is the exercise I want you to take, the assignment. Read more about Kigali Amendment. Okay? Last statement says, under Montreal Protocol, it has been observed that mid-latitude concentration of ozone depleting substances has fallen faster than over the Antarctic. Obviously, all three statements are correct. I'm really glad all of you have got it right. Almost all of you, around 84%. Option D is your correct answer. 1, 2, and 3. Right? So I'm giving you two assignments. One, read about different malwares, virus, worms, trojans, and read about Kigali Amendment. These are the two exercises from my side, and In the meantime, let me take a look at some questions and doubts. A student is asking why CFC flow toward the poles and why is there a hole in the polar areas mainly. There are many reasons over here, many factors that contribute to this. See, CFCs, they are distributed all over the world. They are present all across the stratosphere, not just in the polar areas, even in the mid-latitude areas. But ozone hole formation is more in polar areas compared to mid-latitude because ideal conditions exist in polar areas, especially in the Antarctic. See, for ozone depletion to happen, right? I spoke about the cycle, the equilibrium where ozone is constantly getting created and destroyed. That is a natural process. For this to happen, you need extremely cold temperatures, right? You need special clouds which bring that kind of temperature, which is present mainly in the polar areas. To bring those temperatures down, you also need a kind of wind circulation which locks in the cold temperature in that area, in that region. In polar areas, you have a vortex, polar vortex, which is a cyclonic system that circulates mainly during winters. And this results in the drop of temperatures. There is a huge drop, temperatures of, you'll get minus 60, minus 70 degrees Celsius, right? This is, I'm talking about the temperature of the surface. If you go up in the stratosphere, the temperatures will be much, much lower, right? Because of the formation of this polar vortex, the cyclonic circulation system in Arctic and Antarctic, temperatures plummet and there are these special clouds that get formed which are very, very low in temperature. So there the free chlorine radicals accumulate on these clouds, and once the sun rises, right? Sunrise happens once in 6 months in polar areas. So throughout winter, the clouds would have accumulated, the stratospheric clouds, all free chlorine radicals would have been deposited. Once the sun rises in the presence of the sunlight, it's a photochemical reaction, immediately triggers the breakdown of the ozone. Ozone molecules get broken up and the equilibrium gets disrupted. So ozone creation is affected and destruction gets accelerated. So that is why the ozone hole starts forming. So due to these ideal conditions, you see the ozone hole to be present in a larger size in polar areas compared to mid-latitudes. Next, a student is asking, so please repeat third statement in MCQ. Third statement is correct. It says Montreal Protocol, under Montreal Protocol, it has been observed that mid-latitude concentration of ozone depleting substances is falling faster than over the Antarctic. That's absolutely correct. Because in the mid-latitude, the ozone depleting substances and that air column stays for a shorter period, only for 3 years. It gets exchanged after 3 years. So the molecules fall down, they come down. Whereas in polar areas, it can stay for 5.5 years. So that is why the third statement is correct. No mains based questions on these topics. This is a prelims discussion, right? The current affairs session is mainly prelims focused. Thursday, we have a separate session for mains where we discuss mains questions as well. Aditya is asking, sir, please explain Kigali Amendment. Read about it. That's the assignment I gave you. Plus, I told you what is Kigali Amendment, right? It was an amendment introduced to replace HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons, because it is contributing to global warming. It's a greenhouse gas. Sir, Thursday timings, same time, 8:30 to 10:30. Abhishek is asking, thickness of ozone layer is measured in Dobson units. Thickness of ozone layer is measured in Dobson units. Okay. That is it, guys. Thank you so much for being with me. I hope it was a productive and fruitful session. Do let me know how the session went. Provide the feedback. It will help us better the training sessions as well. Come up with better topics, with better discussion, right? So please provide the feedback. I'll go through it personally. Thanks for being with me. Honestly, the questions were very good. I hope to see you again in a future session. Till then, please take care, study well, all the best, and good night.